We do have a ton to get through in this episode.
Common sense is finally prevailing.
There was controversy this month, Dave.
I'm not particularly excited by that.
Secrets and things on set.
I haven't told them anything.
I think this is just good times all round.
Every Doctor Who is liked by somebody, and that's a really good thing.
Davo, my doctor.
I know we disagree on this one.
First world problems, Dave.
I get why fans are asking those questions.
Oh gosh, that's actually quite a lot to talk about.
It doesn't compute.
It's the elephant in the room.
That's okay.
Fandom versus the BBC.
The cardinal sin.
Moving along.
Lunch.
G'day, I'm Rob.
And g'day, I'm Dave.
And we've got a big monthly episode for you lovely listeners today, from Cushing and Cribbins to weird goings on in the Whoniverse this month, and many, many listener messages for you out there. We'll be diving into nostalgia news and some fun this month on the Doctor Who show. Dave, hello.
Hello, Rob. How are you?
Good. You like that intro?
It seemed pretty passionate.
Yeah, I thought so. And look, before we get on to the news this month, can I just give my annual-ish call out to listeners to please rate and review us wherever you may be listening to us. It really helps the podcast get noticed, especially in these off-season periods where there's no new show on. You wouldn't believe how much it helps. Please and thank you.
No, absolutely. It is lovely to hear from you directly, but it does help the podcast if you leave reviews on whatever platform you're using. It just helps people find us, which is really, really cool. And Rob, I'll just say, if I sound a bit different this month, if anything doesn't quite stand up to our usual audio standards, it's because I am not in my nice setup study. I am in a hotel in Canberra, ready for, at the time of recording, the state opening of Parliament tomorrow.
Yes, you do sound a little different, but I think it'll be okay.
That's fine. I just, we have high standards. We like to do the best for the listeners.
Excellent. Shall we tuck into some news?
Yes. I'm looking forward to talking about the Cushing Dalek movies, but news first, Rob. What have you got for us?
A couple of related pieces from me to kick off, Dave, with where the show's been and what the future might hold. So the first is the frankly bizarre interview Ncuti Gatwa gave on a Sunday morning talk show on the BBC recently. I'm sure many of our listeners may have seen it, or at least heard it, or read about it, where he tossed out the line that he's getting old and his body's a bit tired, and that's why he left Doctor Who. And the first time I saw this, I thought, oh, is he channeling the First Doctor? Is this a riff on this old body of mine's wearing a bit thin? And it's sort of a cool nod, nod and a wink to the fans. But no, he was sitting there saying this with a straight face. I don't think he probably even knows about that line from William Hartnell. And I think anyone watching, because I certainly was thinking this, was thinking, wait a minute, you're 32. You are in stunning physical condition. I mean, to my eyes, Dave, Ncuti is the most muscular of any of the Doctors, full stop. He looks the fittest of them all. To be saying that after 2 very short seasons, he's absolutely wrecked, that just doesn't ring true in the slightest. And I think after this and other things that have happened with this last season, a lot of fans are asking, why can't we just get some truth anymore when things happen? I'll stop there. I won't go on to my next bit. What do you think of this, Dave?
Yeah, I just thought it was all really quite depressing and comical at the same time. I like you, also thought that maybe this my old body's wearing a bit thin was a nice line, but as you didn't end the interview with, thank you, it's good, keep warm, it clearly wasn't. Look, it's one of those situations where the cover-up ends up being more problematic than the actual issue.
Yeah.
Had he not said anything about this or not had anything quite so bizarre, we all probably would have just sort of let it pass. But instead we're going, yeah, why did he leave? What is this all about? Why do we not have answers to all this? So it really just highlighted the position he's in. And to me, it just felt like an extraordinary thing for an up-and-thrusting young actor to say. If you're sitting there casting somebody for your next big blockbuster with lots of location filming and 20-hour days, are you hiring this guy who's all a bit tired because he did 8 episodes of a TV show, when he wasn't even in 3 of them? Just odd.
Yeah, super odd. The next bit of my news is Tom Fussell, the CEO of BBC Commercial, who spoke to the Hollywood Reporter recently. And I loved this. Maybe this is just how bolshy Americans are. Its reporter just flat out asked him, quote, Doctor Who is such a big brand, but it's been struggling of late. Any thoughts? I thought, oh, what a great question. And I'll give you the reply in full. It ran, quote, we're really committed to Doctor Who. We really want to carry on looking at ways for fans to interact with the brand. We look after the brand, whether it's at Comic-Con, merchandising, or whether it's the distribution deal that we've done. The BBC and Disney haven't made a decision yet. When they do, they'll announce it. There's no point to me speculating on it, but Doctor Who is a much-loved brand by everyone in BBC Studios, and we love being part of the story. Now, Dave, to all of that, I'd just say that Tom isn't involved with making the show. And, decisions have been made behind the scenes that he's sort of fudging there. But I think his comments still clearly reflect that the BBC knows Doctor Who is a cash cow. It knows that even if there's no show for a little while, it needs to keep stoking the fire, whether it's with convention stuff going on, opening an online store like they've just done recently, all of that sort of stuff. The show is not going to be forgotten about because they know it turns a buck.
That's all very true, and that is why people refer to the brand and the movement and all the rest of it when they say Doctor Who will come back. And yes, that's almost certainly right. But the other side of that is, over the last month, Rob, I think it's become very, very clear via many, many sources that at this moment Doctor Who is not in production or indeed in pre-production. And I think that a lot of us are underrating just how difficult it can be to turn a show from not being into production into being in production. There's a lot of things you've got to turn on, and there's a lot of money that you've got to find, and you've got to find that in somebody's budget. Now, does the BBC have it in this financial year's budget? I assume not. I'd imagine that's allocated, so going forward to other years. If the BBC's not getting co-production money through a streaming service, and that now seems to be less likely than it was a month ago, shall we say, then they need to lock in some overseas sales. Now, that means going back to all the various networks like the ABC here in Australia that they burnt in favour of Disney a while ago, so they're going to be difficult, complicated conversations to have. So I just think turning the show back on, yeah, it probably will happen at some point, but it's not the easiest thing to do. And the other thing that's really died off in the last month, Rob, is the rumours about a surprise Christmas special.
Yes. Which we had some doubt in to begin with, but it's just seemingly impossible at this point, I think.
Yeah, if it hasn't been filmed now, and I think we'll know if it had been, it's not being filmed now. We know the sets have been struck. We know that nobody's been cast. So unless this is the biggest and most effective rug pull in the history of Doctor Who's television, and maybe it is, yeah, it does look like anything's in production to come out of Christmas.
Yeah, Christmas is 5 months away.
Yeah.
It's scary, eh?
Yeah, some episodes take that long just in post.
Yeah. They do. Yeah, if they have a lot of effects. And previously I'd said, look, if they do something without a lot of effects, maybe they could squeeze something in, but even that door's closed, I think, at this point.
No, I think that's right. Rob, I've got some news which is along a similar sort of vein. Some quotes from some people who've done some interviews. I'm going to give you 3, then I'll get your reaction and give you the big 4th one, okay?
Okay.
So the first is from Billie Piper, who popped up in the last episode, controversially, shall we say?
Yeah, or at least her head did, stuck on Shooty's body.
Yeah, Photoshop Billy turned up. Billy said in an interview, "If we just made the Doctor Who that we made 20 years ago now, it would feel slightly disingenuous, because things were so different then, even 20 years ago, to what we're experiencing, what we've seen, what we've been exposed to since." Ncuti Gatwa has said in an interview, "I finished playing Doctor Who. We all saw the gold sparkle, or did we? I don't know. I just don't know who the next Doctor is, but it's certainly not me." And Peter Davison, Davo, has said in an interview, "I don't think she is the Doctor," referring to Billie Piper. "I think it's kind of just a hand grenade thrown into the final episode to try and go, whoa, what's this? And then it's almost like, gee, get out of that." Any comments on those 3 quotes, Rob?
Davo, my Doctor. I love the guy. That's the best quote ever. That's fantastic. Well, let's take them in order. Billy saying you can't make 2005 Doctor Who. That's true. TV has changed a lot in 20 years. It's kind of a motherhood statement. I don't think that means you have to do something completely radical, though, either. That's the flip side to that coin. Ncuti confirming he's not the next Doctor. Was that Ncuti confirming he's not the next Doctor?
Yes.
Yeah, what a strange quote. We know that, Ncuti. and Davo, bloody brilliant. Interesting quotes this month. What's your 4th?
The other one I've got is from a very long interview with the Radio Times that Mark Gatiss did, a name that was synonymous with New Who for a number of eras and showrunners, but has been missing lately. I don't think for any particular Doctor Who related reason. Gatiss has been very successful in front of and behind the camera over the last 10 years, so I think that he has moved on to bigger and better things, and that's great.
He's got a new TV show coming out, if it's not already out.
He's got stuff coming out all over the place. He's a big deal these days. He's rocking up in movies and all sorts of things.
Yeah, but he's the lead in this.
Oh, well, that's good. Good for him.
Yeah.
Man's done well. If listeners are interested to get some pretty honest comments from Mark Gatiss, do check out the Radio Times interview, but a couple of quotes from it. It's a strange thing because I've revived so many things, but I think nostalgia is a great enemy and we have to all be careful of it. It's part of the reason we're in the mess we are, I think. Weaponised nostalgia. Nothing's as good as it used to be, and yet people can't see that people have always thought that, even when it used to be better, it's a dangerous thing. Weirdly, the first thing I did for Doctor Who was a novel for Virgin Books in the interregnum, The Dark Times, The Times of Chaos, and that's what it was about.
I've read this whole interview, and I know elsewhere in it he talks about sad old Doctor Who fans and how the show's not for them. And my comment to that was, well, who is the show for these days then? Because whoever they are, they're not showing up. So there's that. But in relation to these comments you mentioned, it's weird that Gatiss can be saying this and also acknowledging that he's always been a nostalgia merchant in the stuff that he's written. It's quite a weird thing to be saying.
Yeah, I think there's a bit of a head and heart dichotomy going on there with Gatiss's comments. I think he's also channeling J&T there a bit with the, rose-tinted glasses, and it, was never quite as good as you remember it being. But what I think all of these quotes taken together really do reinforce, and Gatiss particularly, when you look at the totality of what he said, and unfortunately I couldn't read the entire interview to you, nobody quite knows what Doctor Who needs to be in 2020 whatever when it comes back. We all know that it's not going to be the classic series unless you go over into a very niche little small budget corner of the world and do something that's going to get 500,000 viewers. We know that it's not going to be that. We also know that it's not going to be the 2005 series or the Tennant Rose series again. That is also now a long time past its use-by date, and if you're looking to get a new audience in 2027 or 2028, you can't just hanker back to 2005, which, dearie me, is now a long time ago.
Yeah.
And this is the problem. People want to make Doctor Who. They know what it can't be, but I'm not sure anybody quite knows what it needs to be, and that's why I think a number of fans are sort of reaching this conclusion that whether or not they miss it being on, and a lot of people do miss it being on, and they want it to be on, they're saying maybe it does need to have a rest until we've answered the question, who is Doctor Who for? What is it about? What does it look like in the late 2020s? And actually make something new and fresh and exciting, rather than just let's make it out of, habit.
Yeah, which is definitely not the way to do it, which I've said here on the podcast in the past. It just makes no sense to keep doing something if it's not working, just for the sake of it. No,
and as much as Flux wasn't perfect, and Flux did struggle because it had to be filmed during the whole COVID thing, at least Flux was trying to do something very particular for that era of television, and maybe was closer to a model for ongoing modern television than we really perhaps realised at the time.
Well, I think the idea of doing a sort of a mini-series of 6 parts or something that maybe share a lot of locations and a lot of actors and thus cutting down the cost of it even more might be how they have to make Doctor Who in the future because of budget reasons. Yeah,
look, we're not television producers, we don't know, but a lot of similar thoughts coming through the zeitgeist.
Yes, there are. I'll continue us on, Dave, because I found another interesting piece in Radio Times just recently. Peter Purvis was speaking with this month's issue of Doctor Who magazine, and Purvis has been asked whether he held out any hope that there are more missing episodes, and he says he gave up long ago. I'll quote him here. He says, quote, "The closest thing I feel is anger. I'm furious the BBC were so profligate and unthinking. They didn't even archive the telescene copies. How stupid is that?" End quote. And when asked which stories he thought fans were missing out on the most, he said it's a great shame the Massacre is gone. He said he'd like to see the Mythmakers again, and he acknowledges that the fans want the Daleks master plan. But he says there's not a chance none of them are ever going to turn up. So I love, Dave, that he mentions the massacre. The massacre is, low-key, one of the stories I would love to see returned. The way we have so very little in terms of visuals from it just makes it so intriguing to me. And I like the story too.
Yeah, I'm not surprised that Purvis wants the massacre to come back. It's probably his best story as a companion, because he does get to take the lead with the Doctor off visiting whatever his name was, the guy who plays Castellan Spandrel later or something. No, not Castellan Spandrel, Elgin. I know he plays one of the Time Lords in The Deadly Assassin later. But yeah, Stephen gets to do all that. And obviously, look, I would love to see Hartnell's performance as the Abbot of Amboise in that. That would be fantastic. Look, any of those ones he mentioned, I'd love to get back. But whilst I still suspect there are probably... Let me put it this way. There are enough rumours from enough people about a couple of scattered episodes existing in private collections somewhere that there's probably something to it. But we're talking 1 or 2 episodes, I think. You know, the days of big finds seem to be well and truly behind us. Mind you, I thought that 12 years ago, and then we got another 10. So
yeah,
hope springs eternal.
Yeah. And to round out the news, Dave, what have you got for us?
Just a couple of very quick announcements. For those who aren't already aware, Season 13, the Tom Baker, Liz Slade and Philip Hinchcliffe, Robert Holmes season, the great gothic horror season, is the next out on Blu-ray as part of the collection series. That has been announced. It is now available for pre-order on a number of different sites. That's very exciting. Whether it is every fan's favourite season or not, I think that there are many, many fans who rate it up there and think that it's a very, very good piece of Doctor Who. It's full of classics and Planet of Evil. So I'm really looking forward to this. And Rob, you've got to think that Season 21 is after this.
Oh, I thought this would be our chance for Season 21 this time around, honestly.
Yeah, that was what all the talk was, but no, they pulled a little surprise shifty on us. It's 13. The speculation is Season 21 is next, so that's exciting. And also, news hot off the press, I got this last night from somebody, 10 Acre Publishing will be producing a biography of Terrance Dicks by Simon Guerrier to be released sometime in 2026.
Yes, I've heard people talk about that, people who were at the Target Book Club Day that was recently held in the UK, so there might have been some chatter there about it.
Oh, excellent. So look, I don't know anything more than that, but it sounds fantastic. I've got a couple of biographies, actually, of Doctor Who luminaries from the 70s I've got to read sometime. I will try and do that over the next little while.
Yeah, I've got a Michael E. Bryant one.
Yes, and I've got a Malcolm Hulke one.
Yeah, I've got to get to these things too, yeah.
And unfortunately, because they're bigger formats, they don't travel. When I travel, I take novels with me. So now that I'm back home for a bit, or when I'm back home, I'm back in Canberra again. So again, I've got a Missing Adventure sitting over there on the desk that I had on the plane. So yes, when I'm back at home for a longer period, I'll get into some of these bigger books, including a biography of Alexander the Great. I've been really waiting to get into.
That interests me. But anyway, moving quickly along to short topics. My short topic this month, Dave, was inspired by a back and forth exchange I had with someone recently on social media, where it was their turn to sort of counterattack in the argument, and they threw in the comment, well, Doctor Who is all about change. And I just rolled my eyes, because it's one of these comments you see in replies and in quote tweets, in Reddit threads, all over the place, these short, snappy takes on Doctor Who that sound quite definitive and are designed, I think, to shut down arguments, but are they really definitive? And I thought it might be fun to look at a few here, Dave, so bear with me. The first one is, well, let's do the show is all about change, because this is one you hear all the time. Usually when someone's pushing back against criticism of a big shake-up, like a new Doctor or a radical story direction or something. And look, it's true to an extent. The show has changed over the years. Different actors, different tones, different formats. That's part of the magic, and it's not wrong to say it's changed. But here's the thing, not all the changes land. Some have flopped, some have got reversed, others have split fandom down the middle. Just because the show can change and has changed doesn't mean every change going forward is instantly above criticism with a hand wave of, well, the show is all about change, so no, you know, which is how that one comes across. Any thoughts on that?
I think that's what Pip and Jane Baker would call a syllogism, isn't it? You know, Doctor Who has changed, this is changed, therefore it's Doctor Who.
Yeah. Yeah, very much so. Number 2, Doctor Who has always been political. Oh, yeah. The go-to response whenever somebody says the show's gone woke or it's too preachy now. And yeah, Doctor Who has dipped into political waters before. You've got stories like the Happiness Patrol with its Thatcher impersonation or the Green Death with its environmental message. But here's the key difference. As we've said before on this podcast, in the classic era, politics was mostly baked into an allegory. It wasn't characters delivering on-the-nose speeches or name-checking real-world issues every 5 minutes. So while politics has always been in the mix, the style and the subtlety of it has definitely shifted. And that's what many fans react to here in 2025. So Doctor Who has always been political? Yeah, it's a grey area.
Once again, just because something's political doesn't mean that it's good. And as we discussed now, Shooty Gatwa Season 2 Cold Take last month, there are ways to do it and ways to do it, and some work better than others. And I'll give a shout out to our podcast friends over at Pull to Open, who've given us plenty of shout outs over the year as well. They, like us, did a whole series of hot takes and then a cold take on the Gatwa era, and they had a very similar discussion with some mixed views between the two of them, I've got to say. Chris and Peter didn't quite agree on the details of this, but a good discussion about just because something's political doesn't mean it's done well, and there are good ways to do it and weaker ways to do it.
Absolutely. And finally, the Doctor never uses violence. I mean, this one's just pure myth-making. The idea of the Doctor as some flawless, violence-free space Jesus, you know, it sounds nice, but the reality is a lot messier. I mean, the Doctor has blown up planets. Think of Remembrance of the Daleks. He's manipulated people into doing his dirty work. Think of the Dalek invasion of Earth. He's let others do the killing. Sure, he prefers clever solutions, but he's not above playing games that get people hurt. Even the so-called gentle doctors like Davo or Smithy or Jodie have had some really chilling moments. And I think it's what makes the character so compelling, that he or she is capable of this. So the Doctor never uses violence? No, that's nonsense.
Yeah, I think you've made the very correct character argument there, Rob, and I will make the, I think, equally correct television argument, which is that at the end of the day, this is an adventure show, and sometimes in adventure you need a bit of action or a few explosions or a bit of death or, you know, whatever the case may be. It's part of that genre, it's part of the vibe, and that's okay.
Yeah. So basically, an appeal out there to anyone who, in the heat of an argument, pulls out one of these chestnuts. Just think about it. Think about it some more. Then put it back where it came from and don't say it. Please and thank you.
Well, I mean, you can say whatever you like, but don't say it to Rob. I think that's the main lesson there.
Yes. Dave, what have you got for a short topic?
Look, just wanted to mention, now that all of the podcast hot takes are over and done with, I've had a bit more free time in the car over the last couple of weeks to listen to some Big Finish rather than podcasts, which I'd had a number racked up that I did mean to start listening to, and I've got through a few of them over the last fortnight, Rob.
Nice.
2 companion chronicles with William Russell that listeners of the show will know I've become a very big fan of, and I've been working my way through a number of these ones. I really like the way that they tell those Hartnell-era stories without recasting and all the rest of it. The Transit of Venus, which of course has particular resonance for us here in Australia, Rob, because it is all about Captain James Cook and his voyage of exploration to discover for Europeans the east coast of Australia.
Nice.
That's a nice little story in there. Joseph Banks, who used to be on our $5 note, isn't these days, but used to be when I was growing up on the $5 note and had a big part in the founding of Botany Bay. He was a main character in this. I thought this was a quite fun adventure. I enjoyed the setting. I thought that the resolution was pretty obvious pretty quickly. I sort of pieced together the puzzle quite well. But no, that's fine. It was a fun one. And look, William Russell is always fun. And this was really very much just Ian and the Doctor. And I enjoy William Russell speaking as the first Doctor. He does William Hartnell better than anybody else.
Well, he was at an age when he was recording those where he was decades older than Hartnell was. So yeah, he really had a genuine old man voice.
Yeah, I mean, Hartnell was mid-50s and he must have been about 90 doing these. So
yeah.
Yeah, it is pretty incredible. And the second one of those was The Wanderer. This is probably the first of that range that I thought didn't quite work for me, and had it sort of gone much longer, I probably would have given up. I didn't think the story worked particularly well. The big twist about this guy we've met in history turns out to be this person was so insanely obvious from the start. It was just eye roll when they revealed it. So The Wanderer, not a particular strong one, but enjoying those. Rob, I finally got through to The Chimes of Midnight.
And?
It's pretty good.
It's pretty good.
It's pretty good. I certainly, particularly in the first half with the mysteries unfolding, I was very, very gripped by it. I was engaged by it. Oh, it could be this. Oh, no, that doesn't work. And, oh, maybe this is, oh, no, that means that that's not. So there was a lot of, really good engagement from me. The soundscape is really good. I think in terms of soundscape, it's got to be one of the best Big Finishes I've heard. It's really, really good there. McGann's really good, just being the McGann Doctor. I'm still not quite sure what the McGann Doctor is, but he was doing that well here. The resolution maybe didn't quite work all that well for me. I think it sort of dragged a little bit. And this is the third story I think I've now heard with Charlie Pollard as the companion, and I've got to say I get nothing from her. Not quite sure what her character is other than female companion, so that was a shame. But no, this was very, very good. A number of people, yourself included, have been telling me I've got to listen to this, and I have finally.
I'm pleased to hear that, and maybe now that you've heard it once, you'll be interested in going back to it now that you know what it is and what it isn't. There might be a night one day in the future, maybe next winter or something, you'll put it on and have a glass of port or something and listen to it again and see how it hits you a second time.
It is definitely a rare Big Finish that I sit there and go, this would absolutely stand not just a second listen, but multiple listenings. So I think that's very, very true. And finally, Rob, another one that you, the guys over at the Signs of Audio, the guys over at Too Hot for TV have all been saying, you've got to listen to this, you've got to listen to this, you've got to listen to this. Friend of the podcast, Mike Solko, has been saying it, is Fanfare for the Common Men, which I have now listened to as well. It is the one that everybody says, this is how you do the Beatles in response to The Devil's Chord. And look, it's a low bar, but it is significantly better than The Devil's Chord. Look, it's a really fun Davo and Nissa story. It's clever, it's well done. Again, left me guessing for the first half really, really well. The second half, I thought it went a little bit weird in a few places and a little bit over the top in a few places, which was probably what it was trying to do, and it's all part of the fun, so that's all good. But yeah, look, just another entertaining one, and yes, probably another one that now I know what the story is, it will be worth going back to in a year's time or so and having another listen and just seeing how it works on there. Or whatever, not a rewatch, a re-listen. And yes, as somebody who's, look, I'm not as big a fan of the Beatles as some people in the world, but I'm a fan of the Beatles. And yes, there were a number of nice little Easter eggs there for Beatles fans, and indeed for fans of the Common Men as per An Unearthly Child.
Now, Dave, I think last month you were talking about watching a number of season 19 Davo stories. Here you're listening to a Davo audio. Is the tide turning for you with Davo?
I'm actually reading a Davo Missing Adventure as well.
I rest my case. Something's going on.
It's the winter of Davo.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, it is.
As long as it's not the winter of discontent when you're reading Davo.
Well, more on that next month when I finish this book.
Oh. Dave, this month, of course, we're looking at the two Peter Cushing movies from the 1960s, Doctor Who and the Daleks from 1965, and Daleks Invasion Earth 2150 AD from 1966. These are two movies I think we've both wanted to do for a long time, maybe never quite saw an in or saw a logical reason to be doing them, but they're a part of Doctor Who, and we've wanted to do them, and finally, this is our 10th year of the podcast, we're doing it.
Yeah, two very big parts of Doctor Who that we haven't yet covered, but you put it up and I said, yeah, let's go.
Yeah, to briefly set the stage for those of you who don't know what's going on, these two films were made during the early years of Doctor Who's TV success, particularly the success of the Daleks. So, producers have gone, let's put them in a film. Let's grab these scripts. Let's make them into films. They were aiming for a broader cinematic sort of appeal, though, maybe even hitting some markets like the US. They cast Peter Cushing as the Doctor. He was well known for his roles in Hammer horror films. They cast him as a human inventor, literally called Doctor Who, rather than being any sort of alien. Yeah, they reimagined the Dalek stories from the first and second seasons of the show, condensed them down to 1.5 hours. That's what they're all about. I wonder how many of our listeners have actually seen them.
Yeah, I know certainly we'll talk about our own experiences in a moment, but when I was a younger part of fandom, these were ubiquitous. They were a big thing that a lot of people had seen, perhaps because they were easier to access than a lot of the old Doctor Who was. But it's interesting, the more I read about these movies, the more I realise that the producer behind them really was a proper Doctor Who fan who wanted to both, sure, financially exploit Dalek mania and Doctor Who mania, and you know, this is a property. We didn't use those terms back in the 60s, but this is a property that is big at the moment. How can we do something else beyond just making a TV show? But clearly was a Doctor Who fan, and it's fascinating looking at the vision he went into, which basically was to put the Doctor Who TV show on the big screen, complete with William Hartnell and the same titles and all of that sort of thing. And eventually, just through a bunch of different reasons we're going to talk about, it morphed into a very different vibe with a very different music, very different titles, and a very different Doctor, both in terms of casting and personality, because of the necessities of filmmaking. And it's just amazing to think that it started off as, I want to make TV Doctor Who for the movies, and we ended up with, well, something a bit different.
But before we get to that, let's talk personal memories and first impressions. When, Dave, and how did you see these films?
I saw them both on VHS. They were both available at the local video library when I was very, very young, long before I think there were any other Doctor Who cassettes out there in the video library. So this is before stuff like Revenge of the Cybermen and Robots of Death and all of those started to filter into the video shops in the later 80s. These were out there in the video shops. So as a kid, like, you know, we're talking like 4 or 5 who loved Doctor Who, you'd walk through the video library and there next to Will-O-the-Wisp is Daleks. Wow. And so I know that we hired the first movie repeatedly. It would sort of be every second time we went to the video shop. That was what I chose to borrow, and I used to watch it obsessively. The other one was broadcast here on commercial television as, you know, like a Sunday afternoon movie. I don't know if it was Channel 7 or Channel 9, but it was one of the commercial stations here did play it as a movie in the early 80s, and we did record it off air, which means that my memories of it are so strong that when I watch it now, I still instinctively know where the commercial breaks were. So that's quite interesting. So they were both things that I watched again and again and again as a kid, particularly under the age of 10, and didn't see them in the cinema though until about 3 years ago, where they were rebroadcast at the Astor Theatre, which for those who don't live in Melbourne, the Astor's a very old heritage-listed theatre that shows a lot of old movies and does, you know, big screenings of stuff from the past, and they did a double bang feature of the Daleks and Dalek Invasion Earth 2150 AD, and a bunch of us, basically the Melbourne half of the Doctor Who show and all the 42 to Doomsday guys and all our mates went to see that at the cinema, so I saw that for the first time, and we'll talk more about that experience as well.
Nice. This question really stretched my memory, which will make more sense when we get to our initial impressions. Either because our local library had these films on VHS, or maybe the library had one and the local video store had another, or maybe someone in the local club had a VHS copy off a TV airing, or maybe my brother had recorded it off TV. My brother actually was a dab hand at recording cool stuff on TV back in the 80s. I remember he would scour the TV listings. You know, what's Channel 9 showing at, like, you know, 12:45 or whatever. And, you know, it'd be like something like Waterloo or some really classic war film or something. And he would tape these things and say, here's a really cool movie you can watch. So I got to see a lot of stuff that way. Maybe I saw it that way. The point being, I actually don't know how I saw this. But it would have been the late 80s, maybe even the early 90s by the time I saw both.
Oh, wow.
But probably the late 80s. I have very hazy memories of this stuff.
But you definitely would have been over 10 by that stage.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I was 10 in the mid-80s, so
exactly,
heading towards the late 80s, you know, heading more towards 14, 15. So I'll talk more about that when we get to our initial impressions, but what about your initial impressions of these films, Dave?
Then or now?
Then.
Then, I bloody love them. I mean, this is everything that a Doctor Who fan 6-year-old wants. It's big, it's colourful, it's exciting, it's quick, it doesn't drag, it's got Daleks, it's got a cool TARDIS, it's in colour, and it's not just in colour, it's in colour, and it's these were everything that I wanted. Definitely my favourite though was the first one at the time. I think the second one with the sort of the Earth setting was a bit more drab, a bit less colourful, probably dragged a little bit more. But yeah, love them both.
This is going to be an interesting conversation then, because my initial impressions were that I didn't like the films. And I think this is why my memories are so hazy about when and how I watched them, because they came and went for me basically, and I didn't pay much attention to them. I think as soon as I'd read about them, before I'd even seen them, probably in something like Peter Heining's A Celebration coffee table book, it didn't sit right with me that there were a couple of films that just didn't fit the continuity, the canon, the lore, whatever angle you want to look at it. I mean, yeah, I found it kind of quirky, and I knew Peter Cushing was in Star Wars, so I found it sort of interesting, but it was mostly, no, this doesn't fit, this doesn't compute, which as a young fan was a very big deal for me. I needed stuff to fit. So back in the day, I watched the films, and I was thinking as I watched them, these films don't fit. This isn't Doctor Who. Even before the opening credits had stopped rolling, Dave, making me predisposed to not liking them, beyond being just a curiosity, something I needed to see as a fan, but not something I was going to invest my time into because they weren't part of the ongoing story. They were just some weird offshoot. And that was my initial impression.
Yeah, I think that's actually quite reasonable. Had I come to these when I was 13, 14, I don't think they would have made nearly the impression they did on me when I was 4 or 5. I think that's pretty fair.
Okay, let's get into how they hold up. Dave, your brief, spoiler-free thoughts. Are they fun? Are they worth watching today?
They are definitely fun. They're definitely interesting. They are very, very easy to watch. The first one particularly. They have got their flaws. And we'll discuss what those are. They're not perfect. And I think were they not Doctor Who films, I'd probably be a little bit more dismissive of them than I am, because there's stuff as a Doctor Who fan I could take out and find interest of them in. For me, though, watching them now, having watched a lot more cinema from the UK, back in the day, I can really see where this belongs in British cinema. When I compare this to movies like Dr. No and The Pink Panther, those big movies from roughly that period in British cinema where it's big, it's in colour, it's loud. I think Britain's just really starting to properly get over the war and they're starting to have a bit of fun again, and you sort of get that cheeky British humour rather than that perhaps dour British humour or that very earnest British experience that you get in a lot of movies sort of between the war and this period. You think of stuff like Bridge on the River Kwai or The Great Escape, which are fantastic movies, but they're not this. We're now into that early Bond, early Pink Panther, Doctor Who, Daleks, colour, excitement, and really wild things era. And as an example of that, I think they do hold up very well.
Okay. I'm a lot kinder than I was when I was a kid, but maybe not to a huge degree, because I would say these are fun. I'd say they're worth watching, but only for the Doctor Who fan who needs to be a completist, or those who have a genuine curiosity of, what would happen if you took a 1960s Doctor Who script and you recast it and you shot it on a much bigger budget and it was in colour? Because that's literally what these are. If that interests you, then yes, I think they're worth watching, at least for that. And I might move on to talk about their status in fandom and canon. You might have some thoughts on this too, Dave. The most up-to-date status we have for these within canon is that they actually are canon to some degree, because in the novelisation of Day of the Doctor, Kate Stewart tells Clara about the films, and I got this quote, "Seen them? The Doctor loves them. He loaned Peter Cushing a waistcoat for the second one. They were great friends," end quote. So, yes, they exist in the Whoniverse now. They've been canonised in that novel. But the Doctor is just a role being played by Cushing. He is not actually the Doctor. I think that's pretty charming, and I think it's about as good as you can get in terms of fandom itself, I think the regular re-releases on VHS and then DVD and now this super scrubbed up version on Blu-ray and that limited theatre run has kept it in the mind of fans and, you know, introduced new fans to the idea that these exist. Now, I don't know how excited somebody who joined fandom 2 years ago to watch Ncuti Gatwa might be about watching a 1960s Peter Cushing movie. I don't think they would be on the whole. But the movies certainly aren't forgotten about or hidden or unavailable. And I think that's good.
No, they certainly had their VHS release in the 80s. They had a DVD release in the 90s, and then again later on. In the late 90s, there was the Dalek Mania VHS that came out, which was a doco about them. So they've certainly existed. I think that the really interesting point they serve in fandom is that for many, many decades, we have asked ourselves the question, what would Doctor Who look like if it was a movie? What would it gain? What would it sacrifice? And I actually think that these movies stand up as a really good testament to exactly what Doctor Who would look like as a movie. Would it be bigger budget and more colourful and pacier and more exciting? Absolutely. Would it also sacrifice a very large amount of depth and subtlety and messaging to achieve that? Yes, and I think that that's the good and the bad of what you see here. In terms of whether these are canon or not, it's never even occurred to me really that they are or should be. They're just this quirky little side project that was done outside of the television program. But I do remember fondly a brief encounter in Doctor Who magazine back in the 90s, which was a one-page story where the third Doctor was bored on a wet Sunday afternoon while exiled to Earth and went to the movies and happened to see this movie playing and had a delightful time laughing at it.
I love it. Well, with all that preamble, should we bring the spoiler curtain down and actually talk about these movies in depth?
Yes, let's go for it.
All right. Dave, Doctor Who and the Daleks, I'll kick us off by saying you notice right away with the opening titles, wow, this really is a movie. It's in colour. The fonts, the lettering on the screen is really 60s, and the music is super jazzy. It's jazz music. This could just as easily be 101 other movies from the 60s. It doesn't feel like Doctor Who at all when you're watching the titles. It doesn't feel like the TV series at all on so many levels.
Yeah, it's definitely a movie of that era because you have these really long opening credits and then a sort of a 2-second closing credits, as was the style of movies at the time, which was interesting. And as a kid, that sort of threw me because I'm used to television where you have short opening credits and then all the long credits at the back. So that was interesting. I actually think that it's a wonderful opening to the movie. I love just something about that colour and movement of those opening titles. I love the theme. It's stuck in my mind. I'm very, very fond of it. And yes, you've sort of got the words Doctor Who and the Daleks in large friendly letters, just having fun being there, which I think is a really strong opening. But again, let's talk for a moment just about what I intimated before the spoiler curtain about the transition of this from TV to screen, where the producer said, right, I want the Doctor Who theme tune. That's iconic. It's like, no, you can't have that. Oh, all right, well, we'll do this. And, I want William Hartnell. Well, the Americans don't want him. They want somebody who's a box office draw. Oh, we won't have him then. Well,
and he's probably recording 45 weeks a year or something.
Well, I reckon if you paid him this money to take a break, he would have. We want to have the Doctor should still be this mysterious alien. Well, the Americans won't understand that, so let's just make him an eccentric professor. Okay. And suddenly you're in a very different place, which as a kid I didn't even blink at. I was like, okay, this is a different character. He's made a TARDIS in his backyard. He's got a young granddaughter called Susan, and now they're on the planet Skara having adventures. And let's face it, I saw these long before I saw the actual 1960s story.
And an older granddaughter called Barbara.
She's barely in it.
Well, I think the opening is quite clever because we do see those two granddaughters, Barbara and Susan, reading the highfalutin science text, and it pans over to the Doctor and he's reading the Eagle comic and giggling to himself. And so in a second, you instantly get, okay, he's old and he doesn't take life too seriously. You sense he's a mad professor. And then Ian arrives, and next minute we're in the TARDIS and it's blasting off. And yeah, speaking of that TARDIS, it's a real mess inside, isn't it, Dave? I think they do a much better control room in the second film. Even that one's not like the TV version, but the console room in this is like they asked the Blue Peter team to make something, in 5 minutes with some offcuts from a craft experiment, Dave. It's shoddy!
No.
Yes,
the first one is the better one.
The
first one's exciting and weird and groovy with flashing lights and lava lamps and just weird crap everywhere. I absolutely... I love it. And the second one looks like a cheap TARDIS because they've tried to make it look like the TARDIS. And so they're like, oh, well, it needs a scanner and it needs a flashing light here and here's a control panel. And there's no love put in it. It's just a cheap and tacky TARDIS. The first one is the exciting and fun one, but they've both got the cool sink plunger to start the engines.
Oh, we're going to disagree so many times in this. I can tell already. Because... obviously, we're doing the first Dalek story here, but in an hour and a half. And I really don't mind the pacing, because let's slaughter this sacred cow for the 5th or 6th time I've said it over the years on this show. I'm not particularly into the first Daleks TV story. I think it's incredibly basic for how long it's drawn out. So this movie is far more palatable to me in terms of a script, much more palatable even than the colorised edit they put out a couple of years ago of the Hartnell story, Dave.
Well, anything's better than that abomination. Look, as somebody who does love that first Dalek story, I think that you can definitely see the changes they've made to the script. But what's very interesting is that almost every single beat of the story from the TV version is in the movie, right down to the fact that I'm fairly certain that in both the TV and film versions, the fault locator says that K7 is the reference for the fluid link. It's that close to the script. But Rob, I've got here where each of the cliffhangers would have been if this was the original TV story.
Oh, okay.
So on that, episode 1 goes for about 19 minutes, which is, fair enough. It does all the same setup. It's got to introduce the characters, but all the wandering around on Scarrow, finding the city, getting lost in the city, is all there. Episode 2, 12 minutes. Episode 3 and episode 4 are 13 minutes each. So similar sort of beats, but condensed down and a lot of the background dialogue taken out. Episode 5, 7 minutes.
I was going to say they're going to start speeding up, surely.
Yeah, episode 6, 10 minutes. And episode 7, 11 minutes. So the entire back half of that story, those last 3 episodes, the whole expedition is done in 28 minutes.
Yeah, that makes sense. But that keeps it moving. I like that.
It absolutely keeps it moving. And as a kid, I appreciated that more. I enjoy it now, and I think that it does work in a certain way. But you also lose stuff like the discussions between the different Thals about what's happening and about their history. You lose the discussion between Ian and Barbara about what pacifism really means and what the Daleks really are. The scene that in the TV story is Ian convincing the Thals that they will fight for something, is the Doctor convincing the Thals, and it's condensed down to about half a sentence. Is that good in terms of pace? Absolutely. Are you sacrificing some depth from the story and some meaning of the story? Unquestionably you are.
But for the audience that it's trying to reach, I think that's the right thing to do.
For a casual audience that just wants to be entertained for 90 minutes, for a 5-penny movie back in 1960-something in London or indeed in America, which is what they're trying to do, yeah, of course it works.
Now, at the start of the Blu-ray that I put on, and for the second movie too, there's a notice that the film shows attitudes that have changed over time. And I thought, it's not like Cushing does blackface halfway through the film, or I don't think anyone drops the N-word, or I don't think there are any gay characters being made fun of for being gay. Indeed, I don't think there are any gay characters. So all these things that a warning like that usually refers to, I knew just weren't in the film, full stop. And so I kept it at the back of my mind as I was watching both of the films to try and figure out what the warnings were for. And best I can make it, it might be racial representation or lack of racial representation. Perhaps it's gender roles, because Barbara is pretty useless in this film. Maybe it's the stereotyping of working class characters, particularly in the second film. maybe it's the colonial saviour showing up in the first film and teaching the natives how to fight, stuff like that, which to me aren't really up there with the kind of stuff I usually see these warnings in place for. But I guess we live in an age where, someone somewhere might have a whammy about something, so the warning is there. All I'll say about that, though, is I'm grateful the films aren't edited. If someone has seen something bad in them, I'd prefer a warning and then an unedited film any day of the week. Yeah,
that's curious. There's certainly nothing in there at all that even remotely made me go, ooh, that's dated.
Yeah.
Is it very 1960s? Yes. I mean, maybe, yes. Some of the racial stuff about, this form, 2 arms, 2 eyes, that's perfection. Maybe. That's a bit of a stretch.
Yeah, I was surprised by that. I really was.
Now, I need to say, Rob, we haven't spoken about the Daleks yet. The Dalek casings here are fantastic. They're big, they're colourful. I think they lose something with the fire extinguisher effect rather than the ray gun that they have in the TV version. I think that's a shame, but I know that they initially wanted to fire flame, and it's like, no, we can't do that. That's just not safe. Oh, well, if we can't have flame, let's have smoke. Okay. But the matte paintings that they use for a lot of the backgrounds are absolutely gorgeous. The colours are great. The opening of the Dalek City looks fantastic. But I want to say, I think the model of the Dalek City, which is very basic, and it's actually barely seen in the movie. It's only ever seen really in the distance through the trees. That's not nearly as good as the big city model that they have in the TV version. And that's a shame. But look, the Daleks are just amazing. And there's hundreds of them. Well, dozens anyway.
Yeah, I've got to say, one of the few saving graces of those awful hunchback Daleks in the Smith era was that they were coloured. And at the time, that was my one saving grace for them. I was like, oh, these are colourful. These are like 60s Daleks. I like that they're colourful. I hate the design. I hate a lot of other things about them. They look very plasticky. They look like, what would happen if Apple made a Dalek, for example. But I really like the colours because I do like the colours of the Daleks in these films. And obviously the Daleks on set with Hartnell in his era were colourful. You had the silver and blue Daleks, for example. Maybe he didn't have bright red ones, but he had the silver and blue ones too. You just can't tell in black and white. So I do love seeing Daleks in colour. Yes, very good call there.
A couple of comments about the cast. Roberta Tovey is excellent as a child actress in this. I'm even now, looking back as a cynical 40-something-year-old, I'm quite impressed with how well Roberta Tovey does.
I think she's better in this than in the second film.
That's probably true, yes, that's probably fair. And I do need to mention, Rob, I have actually met somebody who was in the cast of both of these movies.
I've met a Dalek from this movie.
Was it Robert Jewell?
No, Kevin Manser.
Oh, okay, there you go. Well, I met Robert Jewell, who was a Dalek in both of them. And I remember him being interviewed at a convention in 1990 here in Melbourne, and he spoke a bit about his experience in these movies. But his main takeaway about this one was that he thought Roy Castle was an idiot, and he hated working with the Fool.
Really?
Yes. Now, look, it's fair to say Robert Jewell was a very grumpy man towards the end of his life, and I think he had a real chip on his shoulder about the fact that he'd been an actor. I was a proper actor. We were actors, hired to act. And it's like, well, you're inside a metal casing. No, but we were actors, damn it. And all he's sort of remembered for is being inside a metal casing. I think that frustrated him. But no, he had no time for Roy Castle at all.
That's interesting, because the main cast talk about him quite fondly. They think he was a really fun guy, and he'd bring his trumpet to work and play his trumpet and things like this.
Yeah, and all the behind-the-scenes talk is that he and Peter Cushing particularly really sparked off each other and were lifelong friends until they died only a couple of weeks apart.
Yeah, isn't that sad?
Yeah.
Looking at its legacy, its influence, its place in Doctor Who history, Dave, I think it has its place. Like I say, I was reading about it in a celebration back in the 80s, and it's never really gone away since. There's been all those releases we've spoken about. So it's definitely not forgotten. It's not spoken of. But at the same time, I think there'd be plenty of fans today who certainly haven't seen this at the very least. Would you recommend it to them?
Can I save my verdict on that until we've talked about both movies? I'll give it to you collectively.
Okay, then. Well, shall we move on to the second film?
We should. Dalek Invasion Earth 2150 AD.
Yeah. Let's have a comparison to the first film, because obviously this is a bigger budget, there's a darker tone, there's more action. Those are the highlights. What are your thoughts?
I think that this feels a lot more like a constructed movie than the first one does. The first one just feels like, let's tell this story in a movie format. And it's fun and it's quick and it's easy. This feels like they've sat down and gone, right, what are we going to do here? Because the plot, compared to the first one, which I said was really beat for beat the same, the plot here is almost completely different. After you get past the equivalent of about part one of the TV version, almost nothing is the same other than there's a Dalek mine in Bedfordshire. What's going on, the resolution is different. Most of the characters are completely changed. A number of them are removed. The plot lines are completely removed. Now, yes, there's some good reasons for those in a couple of cases, like the romance between David and Susan obviously is removed because that would be really creepy given Roberta Toby's about 10. So, that makes sense. And obviously they make it a lot quicker, but it is a very different story to the first one. There's not a slither to be seen.
No.
And that's really, really evident. And again, you've got those more constructed changes. So as I referred to before, they go from, let's just do this wacky TARDIS that looks like something a crazy old coot would invent in his backyard, to, well, no, we need to do the TARDIS. So it's now going to look like a TARDIS. And that's just not quite as fun. I've got some issues with the cast. I think there's a lot of spectacle in this. And as a kid, I remember the flying saucer was something that was just a wow moment. That just blew my mind, the flying saucer, and every time I watched it. The Robomen, as a kid, I thought they were fantastic. Different thoughts now. I think this is a much more mixed experience. It feels like it's almost trying too hard.
Ooh. Interesting. You certainly get a sense of the bigger budget straight off. There's lots of location filming. The first half an hour is extremely action-packed. And really, the whole movie has a lot of action. But rather than, oh, look, we're at home and it's so cozy and now we're on the TARDIS and now we're on Skaro and we're just wandering around like in the first film. This one's boom, we're off and we're running straight away, which doesn't mean it's Die Hard or Rambo or something all of a sudden, but it's extremely noticeable that this is an action film with a bigger budget, and being set on Earth, I think, does make it darker because all this stuff is happening to our world. It's not some fantasy race of people on an imaginary planet. This is the real world. And I think it grabs you. It certainly grabs me much more for that reason.
Yeah, I don't agree that it is set on our world, because compared to the Daleks' invasion of Earth, where they really managed to ground this in what feels like post-war Britain, and you've got the time to go, not even the chimes of old Big Ben, and they talk about London, and then of course you have the famous filming around London with Westminster Bridge and Trafalgar Square and everything. This, although it is notionally London, and yes, okay, there's some poles in the background of the skyline, fine, it just feels like a movie world. It never to me felt like or feels like this is London.
Well, look, I'll go a step further and say I think a huge weakness of the film is the whole 2150 AD setting, when there is nothing, literally nothing, to suggest this is 2150 AD. That might surprise people who have never seen it. They've not done a thing to make you think this is 200 years on from the 1960s.
No, even the TV version has the shot of the Battersea Power Station that now looks like it's been turned into a nuclear reactor. And you can see Battersea here with the chimneys down, but that's all it is.
Yeah. I think if they had gone with the Earth was invaded in 1967... and, just a touch into the future for the people watching this, all of the sets, all of the weapons, all of the clothes, the vehicles, the look of London, all of it would have seemed spot on, and that would have been really chilling. Like, oh, wow, what if aliens came next year and invaded? But to say this is 200 years in the future and nothing's changed and people are driving around in crappy 1950s vans and stuff, it makes no sense at all. And it does actually take me out of things. You sit there thinking, I'm meant to believe this is a long way into the future. Not just 20 years or 50 years, but like 200 years. And it's just not. It's 1960s England.
Yeah, I think that's right. All of that said, though, where the money is spent, it does look really, really good. The flying saucer is a really cool effect. Now, yes, if you look at it all cleaned up on the big screen now, I remember when we saw it at the cinema, you could very clearly see the wires in a few shots, but that's because we're seeing a remastered version on a big screen. Okay, fair enough. But that looks really good. There are even more Daleks. They look really good. The map paintings, again, are really, really good. And yeah, there is location footage. So it does clip along, again, at a really good pace. I can't do the episode comparison to the TV version this time because it just, like, half the cliffhangers just don't exist. They're not even remotely there. So yeah, look, it's pacey and it's fun. And as a kid, although I preferred the first one, I was certainly not bored by this one.
Yeah. You've mentioned the Dalek saucer a couple of times there. I think they do really well with the visuals and effects too. I think that Dalek saucer in some scenes looks extraordinary. It's like they've got an actual prop up in the air that's actually flying around like a drone. You know, of course it's not. It's a model. And in some scenes you can see it's a model. But in other scenes it's really bloody good. When it flies in and opens fire on the truck that Susan's been riding in, I think that's done really well. I assume they probably just drew the laser beam onto the film and then synced it with the explosion. It's very effective for 1960s effects. I would have been geeking out watching this in the 1960s, Dave. It's really well done. It's not Star Wars, but for the 60s, oh man, this is great.
Yeah, that scene absolutely captured my imagination as a kid. And also just some of the action is clearly better done as well. The scene where the guy tries to escape from the Daleks and the Robomen before he's led into the saucer, that would be a very basic scene on television, but in the movie he climbs all over buildings and then falls through canopies and finally gets exterminated by about 7 Daleks. You know, that is just an example of having more time and more money, and that does pay off.
And broke his ankle, I think, doing it.
I believe so, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And of course the scene, you know, all Robomen attack the Daleks. You know, they really go for it. It's a very exciting thing.
It is, and it's worth mentioning that for all of Peter Cushing's very good performance in some of these scenes, he was actually very sick during the filming of this. And I discovered, I didn't know this until I was researching for the podcast, what they actually did was filmed every scene they could without Peter Cushing, and then had to restrike some of the sets and go back and film his scenes on those sets because they basically left it as long as possible to let him recover and recuperate. And Cushing has gone on record as saying that they were very, very good to him in allowing him that space to recuperate. I think that when Cushing's on fire, he's really, really good, but you can see a few times where he's probably not quite as active and giddy and fun as he was in the first one, although again there's speculation that's partly because the reviews actually were pretty negative about his performance in the first one and said he was too silly.
Interesting. I mean, we'll get to Cushing as the Doctor after we finish this movie discussion, but one character I do want to talk about is Bernard Cribbins. Because we get Bernard Cribbins. Again, if you've not seen this, Bernard Cribbins is in this. He replaces Roy Castle.
Yeah, Special Constable Tom Campbell, who is kidnapped by the Doctor.
Yes, in this great scene at the start where there's a jewellery heist going on and he runs into the TARDIS thinking it is an actual police box. That's quite clever, actually. They should do that in the show. Have a policeman... Well, we've had Yaz, I guess, but...
Yeah, but he gets hit over the head, staggers into the police box. They go, oh, the poor fellow who's been hit over the head. Oh, well, we'll just dematerialise and go off to 2150 AD with him. It's a bit weird. Look, he's in it. He's one of the strengths in this. He gives it a bit of energy. I think that you're right. Roberta Tovey has less to do and does it less well. And the Doctor's niece, Louise, I mean, she might as well not be there.
She's got a great costume, though.
Oh, yeah, that's great, but she hasn't got any dialogue.
I enjoyed looking at the costume. It's like, oh, that's like a female Sherlock Holmes costume. That's really cool. But Bernard Cribbins, yeah, I quite liked what Roy Castle did as Ian in the first film, but I do like Cribbins in this. I think their performances are probably as good as each other, but Cribbins gets to be in the bigger budget, filmed on location piece, so he's in the film that might look a bit better, but I do think the characters are equally good fun as each other.
Yeah, so Robert Jewell did mention this as well when I saw him at a convention. Now, he was, just for the record, the actor inside the Dalek casing that comes up out of the Thames in both the TV and movie version.
A lot faster in the movie.
It's too fast in the movie. Again, the TV version, you you have this slow build-up of what's that? Oh, look, it's a Dalek, and it builds up. And it's a really good build-up here. It's just, oh, there's a Dalek, and then, oh, we're gone. He actually didn't say that he thought that Bernard Cribbins was as big a fool as he thought Roy Castle was, but he was very clearly, obviously, quite annoyed that it was technically a very difficult shoot for the Dalek operators. And he was frustrated that Bernard Cribbins was having a lot of fun and entertaining everybody and sort of being the character that he was. And they're like, guys, I'm inside a studio, inside a Dalek casing with some very difficult stuff to do, and you're faffing about over there telling, music hall gags. Like, dude, there's a place and a time. And so, interesting that there was that tension between them.
Let's talk Cushing as the Doctor, Dave. How do you think Cushing's Doctor Who holds up as a character?
Yeah, it's fascinating because it's obviously the first time somebody other than William Hartnell has played the Doctor. And again, the producer went into this with the idea of, I just want William Hartnell's Doctor on the screen. And as the script evolved and as production evolved and as they tried to pitch it to an American audience, it's just been changed until you've got this friendly, cuddly old man who is an aspect of the Hartnell Doctor, but without a whole lot of other aspects around him. So he's not nearly as multidimensional as the original First Doctor. I think that for a fun, quick, friendly movie, it works really, really well. And whilst I liked him as a kid, as an adult, I actually really appreciate him. I appreciate the twinkle that he's got in his eye. I appreciate the fun that he's having. I appreciate the way that he can move between sort of laughing at Ian and Tom and laughing with Ian and Tom. I think it's a really good performance, but it's not one that would stand up beyond 2 90-minute movies.
I think there's a good dash of Hartnell in the Cushing Doctor, particularly in some scenes over others. I don't know, particularly in the first movie, whether that's Cushing watching a few TV episodes and maybe adopting some mannerisms, or whether it's just Hartnell and Cushing doing an old man routine and just ending up in the same sort of place. I mean, quite extraordinarily, Cushing was about 52 when he made the first one, which is only 2 years older than I am now. Yet he looks about 70 years old.
Well, that's that thing of everyone in the UK looked about 20 years older than they were back in those days. Yeah,
that's true, actually. And I feel that he's mostly the Doctor in terms of who the Doctor was in the 60s. We have a guy who's super smart, check. He's a bit twinkly, check. He dotes on his granddaughter, check. He's got a time machine, check. He has an interest in adventure, check. He wants to set things right. Maybe that last one isn't something Hartnell wanted to do in 63, but by the time they were making this in 65, the Doctor's more in that direction. So in terms of what a 60s Doctor is, I don't think you can look at Cushing, and I'm not saying you were saying this, but I don't think you can look at Cushing and go, ooh, he's not very Doctorish. I think he is Doctorish.
Oh, yeah. No, he's definitely Doctorish. And there's also a very interesting evolution of the character between the first one, which is really literally just this mad old scientist has made a time machine in his backyard and now he's off excitedly exploring the planet, to the second one where he is, well, we've got to work out what's going on and I'm going to solve this problem and defeat the Daleks. There has been that evolution of him from a sort of an accidental hero to almost a movie hero type character. Rob, before we go on any further, a couple of final points for me on the second movie. I think that its great weakness is that it is very shallow, and you look at something like the Robomen, who are intoxicating and shiny and exciting in this movie with big ray guns and wonderful uniforms, but completely divorced from the proper horror of what the Robomen were in the TV version. Its great strength is that it is a very shallow but very well made and very fun image-full movie, and I think the telling of that is that when they did the cover for the novelisation of the Dalek Invasion of Earth, even though it's novelising the TV version, the imagery on that painting is the flying saucer and the Robomen and the Daleks from the movie.
Yeah, it is. I'd forgotten that, but you're quite right. It is. Do you think this would have worked as a trilogy if they'd made a third film?
Look, there's no reason why Peter Cushing wouldn't have worked a third time. There's no reason why it wouldn't have looked good a third time. I did confirm when we were doing this that the fan assumption that the next one would have been an adaptation of The Chase is correct. And I don't know how that would have worked in movie format. I think it would have had to change quite a bit. And even just the conception of, well, hang on, is this just a random guy who's made a time machine in his backyard and now the Daleks have, they're chasing him and it's not quite the same. I don't know if it all would have quite worked, and I do suspect that maybe the concept would have outstayed its welcome had they done a third one.
Yeah, I think it would have been a very loose trilogy. I mean, the first and the second movies don't even really follow one another. We lose Ian and Barbara, we get Tom and Louise, the TARDIS interior is completely different, as we've discussed. There isn't really much discussion of the previous adventure either. There's no real explanation that I can recall for how the Daleks were defeated on Skaro. Now they've invaded the Earth. Like, how did they do that? How do they not need electricity to get around anymore? We don't go particularly deep on the Robomen, which I think you were mentioning earlier. They could have gone into some real horrific stuff there. There's not much connective tissue between film 1 and film 2. So I think you could have had a film 3, but calling it a trilogy might be a bit grand. They're almost just standalone films that you can quite happily watch, without the other.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that's very deliberate. You have to be able to watch the second movie, even if you didn't see the first one. You have to be able to buy a ticket.
Yeah. Would you recommend these to a newcomer, Dave, or to a long-time fan?
That's a really difficult question. Do I think that these are fun movies? Absolutely. Are they visually interesting movies? Yes. Do they have massive nostalgia value for me? Sorry, Mark Gaddis. But do they have massive nostalgia value for me? Absolutely they do. They are also very much of their time, and they're also very cheesy. I don't think we've really highlighted here just how cheesy and quirky and different the humour in these are to what we expect from Doctor Who. And so I think I would only recommend them if you were going in very much eyes open, that this is to Doctor Who what Dr. No is to James Bond. And if you've just grown up on the Daniel Craig James Bonds, you're probably going to find something like Dr. No or From Russia with Love a very strange, different type of thing. And it's the same thing here. And indeed, we did have that experience, Rob, when we went to see these in the cinema. There were a number of people who obviously were fans of our vintage and our generation who were chuckling along with it and occasionally just not, perhaps having not realised quite how cheesy they were, going, oh, wow, that's very, very cheesy. There were several people who very obviously were newer Doctor Who fans, and at one point there was a group that were very clearly laughing at the movie, not with the movie, and there was one woman sitting a couple of rows in front of us who about half an hour in just goes, what on earth is this? With just no idea what she'd been expecting. So I think they're fun. I think that if you can go in and take of what they are very worthwhile. Are they classic, brilliant pieces of movie and cinema? No, I don't think I can say that. Do they stand up as great pieces of cinema? Look, probably not, but they are what they are.
Yeah, that's fair. I wouldn't recommend these to a newcomer in a million years. I think they're just too confusing. It would be like introducing someone to Star Wars via a Japanese manga version. Actually, that wouldn't be too bad. It would be like introducing someone to superhero movies with some of those really quirky Indian superhero knockoff films from the 1970s. I thought you were going to say
Star Wars via the holiday special there.
No, that's not actually a bad one. Or maybe that Turkish version of Spider-Man from about the same time that you sometimes see clips of on YouTube. They're weird. To a long-time fan, like I said at the start, if you've got this genuine curiosity about what would happen if you took a 1960s script and recast it, shot it in colour, all of that stuff, that's literally what the films are. And I think spending an hour and a half with each of them is worthwhile. Even if you come away and you didn't like it and say, well, I'm never going to watch that again, I think it's worthwhile having seen them at least, just to complete your Doctor Who knowledge.
Yeah, that's fair.
Which just leaves the final question, Dave. Our personal favourites. Which of these films do we prefer and why?
For many, many years, I said the first one was my favourite. When we all went to see them at the cinema, I did walk out and go, oh, maybe I was wrong. Maybe the second one is the better movie. But watching it again this time, I went straight back. To me, it is the first one. It is the more fun one. It is the more colourful one. It was the one that I was more engrossed in. Sure, it doesn't have Philip Maddock, but nothing's perfect. I enjoyed the first one more.
Okay.
What about you, Rob?
I'm the complete opposite. I prefer Invasion of Earth simply because I like the storyline more. That doesn't mean, though, that it's the better script. I think the first one has a better script in terms of structure. But in terms of the action being set on Earth, having those outdoor locations and all of that, I think Invasion Earth is the more interesting one to just be looking at. And it might be no surprise that in terms of the Hartnell stories, I much prefer Invasion of Earth to the Daleks as well. I don't actually like the Daleks as a story, so I do have some prejudice there. But yeah, I like Invasion Earth.
Which is interesting, because I have long said that Dalek Invasion of Earth is my favourite Hartnell story, my favourite Dalek story, so I am predisposed to liking it more. Rob, if you asked me to objectively tell you which I thought was the better movie, I would also agree it's the second one. But the one that I enjoy more is the first one.
Interesting. Well, that's been our discussion of the two Cushing movies. Have you seen them? Are you interested in seeing them after you've heard us yakking about them now? I mean, we've probably spoiled you on a few things. Although, if you've seen these stories from the Hartnell era, you know pretty much what's going to happen, I think.
That's true. The plot is not that different.
Yeah. Shall we move on to some listener messages, Dave?
Yes, we should, Robin. Before we go into the longer ones, last episode I did say that I'd read something on social media and couldn't remember who it was from. And that has prompted a friend of the podcast, Simon Moore, to message me and say, I wish to claim to be the source of the quote about the fact that it's not RTD's politics per se, it is the alienating way in which we are dared to disagree rather than invited to disagree. Your Green Death and Invasion of the Dinosaurs comparisons were spot on. So thank you, Simon. I couldn't give you credit last time and now I can.
Very nice. Moving on, this is a best of the messages we received in July, as there were just so many. I'm going to kick off with Darren Potts via email. He says, Hello, Disco Dave and Raver Rob. My friend Neelas from Carrickfergus is a massive fan of your show. Oh, this is going to be good. And shares some episodes with me here and there. Yes, a man called Neelas, who, by the way, is close to 40 years old and refuses to use his real given name, Neil. Anyway, on to what matters. Neil always sends me your alternate galaxies content, and I'm a huge fan. Can you do more of this and less Doctor Who? Kidding, but perhaps we could have a spin-off podcast? I'm a huge Star Wars fan and always enjoy the shows relating to that. Love the Lord of the Rings reviews too. Great stuff. Your recent Andor Season 2 review podcast was absolutely outstanding, and I had to text Neelas to inquire as to why he never sent it to me, and I had to find it myself. Standards are dropping, Neelas. Share the show. Your review has put me in the mood to rewatch the entire show followed by Rogue One. If only you guys got a commission. Keep up the good work. If you ever visit the centre of the universe, Carrickfergus, yes, the small Irish town with a castle, and meet Neil, I'm sure he'll take you to the pub for a pint, although he'll probably make you buy your own. LOL. Cheers from Darren.
Thank you, Darren. That was a lot of fun. Glad you're enjoying it. We will be doing a few more alternate galaxies this year, don't worry.
Yeah, doing a whole nother podcast, though, with its own feed, it's a big job. I'm not sure we can stretch that far.
No, we do what we can when we're inspired to.
Yeah.
And speak of the devil, we have one from Neelas himself via email.
Hey.
Good evening, fellas. Hope you're well. I heard you both mention Deep Space Nine recently on one of your shows, and thus I had to respond because this is completely coincidental. So, I'm not a Trekkie. I never have been, albeit I do enjoy the reboot movies. However, a good friend of mine always preaches about Deep Space Nine. Anyway, he recently came up with a suggestion that if I gave DS9 a go, he would give Doctor Who a go, as he is not a fan. He has seen some Christmas specials and the odd clip or two, but he's keen to explore.
I'm wondering if this fan is Darren.
Maybe. So we've come up with a 5-year mission to give each other an insight into the shows. He's selecting a number of episodes across the entire Deep Space Nine series, whilst I'm doing the same for Doctor Who, and thus we will split Sundays up and watch them. So for my initial set of Doctor Who stories, I've selected one story per Doctor. Not necessarily my favourite from those eras, but stories I feel do the era justice and are a good representation. I've deliberately stuck to 4-parters for classic, but I will include some 6-parters down the line. Here we go, Neil's selections. The Time Meddler, Tomb of the Cybermen, The Demons, Robots of Death, Caves of Androzani, The Mysterious Planet, Remembrance of the Daleks, telemovie, Empty Child, Human Nature, Time of Angels, World Enough and Time, Demons of the Punjab, and The Well. We are not watching them in order, just whatever tickles my fancy, although he has asked to focus on classic first before hitting New Who. So far, we have watched Robots and Remembrance. Tomb is next. I want to make sure I have all elements covered. Strong stories for each Doctor, plus Dalek, Cyberman, Master, Regeneration, etc. Would love to hear your thoughts on the list. P.S. Deep Space Nine has been alright so far. I've been informed it's a slow build and gets better and better. Cheers, guys. Neilers.
That's a really good list, Neilers. I like it. I'd be happy to watch all of those. Maybe my iffy one there is Mysterious Planet for Colin. I think I'd put something different in there, perhaps.
Yeah, I'd have put something like Varos in there for that one, because I think Mysterious Planet struggles a bit to stand on its own. The others are great. As much as I love Human Nature, it's my favourite of the era. Would something like The Impossible Planet be a better representation? Yeah, don't know, but otherwise, really good list. And yes, Deep Space Nine is a slow burn, but please stick with it.
Yeah. From Diddly Dum's Doc Whom. Chums. Interesting point about why we think Doctor Who isn't the place for a direct analogy of a terrorist attack on a music festival, but we can accept Andor's pretty direct analogy of the Wannsee Conference. I think the difference is that Andor has been made as a serious political drama. Perhaps we forget that it's a spin-off from Star Wars. But this is different to any other Star Wars franchise. No palaver with lightsabers, no wisecracking hero, no C-3PO being unintentionally unhilarious. From the somewhat dank and overcast city sets on Coruscant contrasting with the shiny cityscapes in the movies, it's a dark political drama. Doctor Who can't handle being converted into that, and even if it could, I don't think it would want to. Plus, there isn't the least attempt to try doing so. You simply couldn't imagine a scene in Andor where a 2025 US reality TV presenter appears playing himself. The appearance of Graham Norton is clearly intended to be like one of those episodes of Friends where Brad Pitt walks into the apartment and everyone has to pause while the studio audience whoops and cheers with delight. You can't take the political story of Andor seriously if you've got Darth Vader popping up and saying, "Could you be any more of the Rebel Alliance and a traitor?" And you also got it right about how the BBC has taken the US idea of a showrunner and instead of him leading a team of writers or a writing room, they've bastardised the role to one man producing 90% of the work. And while RTD may have roughly the right ideas politically, with him they're delivered at roughly the level of maturity of a student union. Good to hear that Rob has launched himself into Deep Space Nine. I've always thought that about Rob. Nice enough guy, but he clearly doesn't have enough Garrick or Wynn or Wayun in his blood yet. Don't worry about Season 1. It's as weak as most first series of Star Trek franchises seem to be while they're trying to work out what they want to be. All the best, plain and simple, from Doc Whom.
Thanks, Doc. I agree with all of that. I agree that, yes, we wouldn't want Doctor Who to be what Andor is. They're very different things, and that's entirely correct. And I think you're right about the comment about the showrunner. I've been watching a bit of Deep Space Nine as well now that Rob's been doing it as well. And as I do, I've been reading some of the Memory Alpha pages about what happened there. And so many times they talk about, well, someone had this idea, we took it to the writer's room and it wasn't working. But when we changed this and made it this character, not this character, suddenly it all worked. We wrote the script. And I just thought, yes, that's what a writer's room's meant to do. It's meant to just take an okay idea that isn't working and turn it into something that does, sometimes changing it quite radically. But yeah, I don't think Doctor Who knows how to do a writer's room, and that shows.
Yeah, exactly. And I'll talk more about DS9 at the end of this episode.
Yes. We have somebody here who's going by the name, I think I'll go anonymous for this one, which came in via our website. I have a feeling Dave will be receiving a lot of pushback for his take on the Interstellar Song Contest. As such, I'd like to offer something else, full support and gratitude. I will admit, I come to the issues between Israel and Gaza from a place of ignorance. I'm not proud of it, but to be frank, the amount of horrid events in the world has overwhelmed me. As such, when I watched the Interstellar Song Contest, I had no hang-ups about who was meant to represent who or what was meant to represent what. At the time, I thought of it as a pretty fun episode up until the Doctor started torturing the Hellion guy because he got triggered. I love 15, but that was so wildly out of character for any Doctor, much more so for the supposedly healed one. Then Dave reminded me of the Nova Massacre, and I put two and two together. I agree wholeheartedly with everything Dave said. I wouldn't necessarily have had a problem with Doctor Who doing this story in, say, a decade's time. Doing it whilst the conflict is ongoing is truly mind-boggling, especially considering that this is also the episode that features the Doctor flying through space with a confetti cannon. It feels really tone-deaf to have such a silly moment featured after what is meant to be an allegory for a recent and very real massacre. Something I find more egregious, however, is that this episode ends on RTD's favourite trope, just this 1000th time everyone lives. I already didn't like that they've managed to save everyone in the end, but as it took away from what I thought was a truly powerful moment of sheer magnitude, seeing the space station surrounded by frozen corpses. Now, knowing that the moment was pastiching Nova, having everyone be alive at the end is a choice. My view of the episode was already rather soured after the complete lack of follow-up on the Doctor's egregious actions, but now it's sitting on the curb about to fall into the gutter. Dave, you presented your thoughts clearly, calmly, and without malice or anger. You had a unique view of this situation that most would never have conceived. You had a point to raise and did so diplomatically and with compassion. The internet could use more people like you. Rob, you're cool too. Thanks to both of you. Look, that was... I don't have anything other to say to that than thank you. I really appreciate those thoughts.
Yeah, great email. I like being cool. This is David via Facebook. He says, "Hi guys, I've started listening to your podcast after a recommendation on the Big Blue Box podcast, and I'm really enjoying the content and your episode reviews." So shout out to Big Blue Box out there. They do plug us from time to time. Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you, guys. Always a pleasure.
I wanted to thank you for your take on the Interstellar Song Contest, particularly with regards to the Israel-Gaza war. As a Jewish individual living in London, I find it so incredibly frustrating that too often people forget this conflict started with an attack on a music festival and the taking of hostages, many of whom are still suffering in Gaza. I couldn't agree more that it simply wasn't the right forum to display any kind of messaging around the conflict, especially while it is still ongoing and real lives are being affected. Having listened to another pod, not the Big Blue Box podcast, recently, I was so angry at their assessment of the Interstellar Song Contest, which praised the show for its take on genocide, and the presenters kept repeating Free Palestine. I have no doubt these individuals know very little of the history surrounding the conflict. One of them had the audacity to state, "The current genocide started on October 7th. If you mention that day, yet omit what took place at the hands of Hamas, it is, at best, ignorant, and at worst shows complete indifference to the slaughter of Jewish and other Israelis." Hearing your take on the pod was so refreshing and something I really needed to hear. Whilst I agree this war has gone on too long and the Israeli far-right politicians need to go, the constant one-sided demonisation of Israel and resulting anti-Semitism it causes around the world, of which I have experienced, weighs very heavily on us in the Jewish community. I'm not sure if you are Jewish, but nonetheless, thank you for standing with us. Thank you for your moral clarity and your bravery to say what many will not.
Thank you very much, David. That's very kind. Look, at the end of the day, we all have our opinions and we're all entitled to them, and they all come from valid perspectives. I'm very proud that our listeners are able to engage in this topic in a really sensible way. That's really good.
Lovely emails, and I think another one's coming up.
Yes, one from Gil Shalev via email. "Hi guys, as is my habit, a few points. First, picture me standing up and clapping while nodding slowly in appreciation of a thorough, well thought out, detailed and reasoned season review. 2. I wish I could be as gracious and generous as you are. You've evidently gone the extra mile, trying to be fair and view things from multiple perspectives before wrapping the review up with your conclusions. For me, with the exception of Boom, 73 Yards, Lux and The Well, I cannot give any episode in RTD2 more than a 3 or 4 out of 10. The aforementioned 4 episodes were only 7-ish too. 3. 2 major things caught my attention as an Israeli, of course. One is that, Dave, you have visited our beautiful country. I wish I knew and could have possibly got to chat with you. Sorry you had to deal with the worst possible circumstances. Don't let that deter you from coming back on a vacation, as this little spot has surprisingly a lot to offer. Hope you at least got to enjoy some of the time here. Thank you, Gil, I did. Apart from the missiles, it was a very pleasant week.
Yeah, apart from missiles raining on my head, yes, it was great.
Yes, the other 5 days were fantastic. It was those last 4 in the bunker that weren't, but that's enough of that. It's a lovely country.
Yeah.
Of course, the other thing was the section about the Interstellar Song Contest episode, and I have to say, wow, that went well over my head in real time. I haven't thought for even a second that there were any parallels between the episode and the Israeli-Gaza situation, not the least because the plot of the episode dealt with an occupier, which Israel is not, who stole all the local people's resources, which of course Israel did not, as not only did Gaza have no resources to steal, but Israel was actually the sole provider of almost all the resources to the place. Dave, I want to highly compliment the way you handled this topic. We may agree or disagree on any number of points about this topic, and I'm well aware that as an Israeli I do have my biases, but hardly any podcast I've heard could deliver a clear, level-headed and collected way as you did. Seriously, I really appreciate the moral clarity and your acknowledgement that a topic like this is layered, complex and full of pitholes such as most foreign commentators from either side of the discussion fall into. I also share your view that the world, especially the Western world, is actually becoming a better place with time, and that while there's always much room for improvement, we must avoid the doomy-gloomy view that RTD seems to be suffering from. Anyway, as usual, I thoroughly enjoyed listening to you both. I always find a lot to agree with from both of your perspectives, and even in cases where I don't necessarily agree, you're able to explain your point of view in a way that many of the younger folk out there are not. I'm likely older than you, so that's not a jab. Thanks for being an awesome duo, Gil.
Oh, that's lovely. And look, that's 3 emails now, Dave, praising what you said in that episode. And I know you're not here for the praise, but I think you did put it really well in that episode. And I think it's clearly resonated with people for so many to write in like that, to take the time.
Yeah, no, I'm quite flattered by that. Thank you.
Excellent. This next one is from Deletta Tester via email. And this one's interesting, Dave, because Deletta is a young woman from Palermo in Sicily. And side note, my first wife's family from Catania in Sicily. So a big shout out to everyone over there. I used to have family there who got in touch with the podcast by accident. And there's a long story, too long to go into now. But yes, Deletta got in touch with us by accident. But the upshot is we've had some emails back and forth. And in one of them, she raised a really interesting point. And that's what I'm going to read here. She says, can you explain the change in the Doctor from season 1 to season 2? In the first, I saw him as more bubbly with that streak of madness that I personally adore in the Doctor, while in season 2 he was more emotional and empathetic. I don't know how to explain what I mean, so I'll try with a parallel, hoping to not confuse you even more. This new Doctor was born directly from a division of the 10th Doctor, a tired Doctor who had seen too much, lost too much, someone now too burdened by remorse and losses to be able to still be the icon of hope and joy that he's always been. So a part of him feels the weight of time and just wants to stop and find serenity and peace, but a new part still has everything to discover, so he splits, and in the first season this is perfectly noticeable, with the new Doctor being cheerful, crazy, uncontrollable and brilliant, just like a teenager who discovers the world. But in the second season you see him already quite matured and changed. I'm not saying it's wrong, on the contrary, it's a natural evolution. But it's as if we missed a piece. When did he grow so much? When did he lose the recklessness of youth and acquire that maturity? We've seen it with all the Doctors, but it usually happens after a major loss or an unexpected defeat. For example, David Tennant matures with the loss of Rose, Matt Smith with the kidnapping of Melody Pond, Capaldi with the death of Danny Pink and seeing the desperation of his friend, and here, maybe I missed it, and if so, I'd like to know your point of view. P.S. Today I started listening to your podcast, and aside from some comprehension problems, I really like how you carry the discussion and the observations you make. At the moment, I've only listened to half an episode, damn a job that distracts me from my passions, but as soon as I finish, I'll give you more accurate feedback. I wish you a good day. From Diletta.
Thank you, Diletta. That's a really nice email, and you wouldn't be the first person to point out that the conception of the Ncuti Gatwa Doctor as somebody who is now healed and fun and ready to move on in life did seem to go a bit astray in the second season. I don't have an explanation for it, but no, you're not alone in seeing that.
Yeah, it's almost like RTD had the idea, I'll make this the happy Doctor, and then after writing, 8 episodes, he's like, oh no, it's much more fun when they're dark and doing bad stuff. And he just snaps back to it. No explanation.
Absolutely. Now we have a couple of emails regarding our recent list makers on top 5 stories we'll remake on a Disney budget. The first is from Dave Banham. And he says, hi, Rob and Dave. First, thanks for the show. I'm always pleased to hear your takes. I only found the show fairly recently. Ironically, I've not contacted you after many episodes I agreed with, but instead have a list that differs from both of yours on the remake subject. So Dave's list is 5. Terror of the Zygons. While the Zygons look great, a modern sea monster attacking oil rigs would be an upgrade. That's true. 4 rows. In 20 years, effects and even picture quality have improved a lot. The Dustbin and Auton Mickey would be more believable now and less comic. The Nestine would be better. 3. Kinder.
Yeah.
It could have been a real jungle. Better Mara than the redone or original versions. Spookier possession effects. 2. Sharda, so we can have a full live version with a creepier sphere and more epic space stations and ships. 1. The Web Planet, the obvious market leader for me. Totally excessive alien strangers that could be done now without looking like people in dodgy insect costumes. Was a bit guilty about 2 Tom stories. If I were to limit it to 1 story per Doctor, I would drop Zygons and add the Underwater Menace. All the best, Dave. Dave, yep, very reasonable picks.
Excellent. Constable Hansy via YouTube says, some good choices you two made in this episode. I was particularly interested in the Abominable Snowman and Marco Polo, both of which could be turned into jewels with some help from the Bank of Mouse. My 5, The Invisible Enemy. The space effects in the original are already great, but how about inside the Doctor's body and the prawn? A canny designer could take the virus concept and turn it into a thoroughly repulsive creation with legs and slime. It would be good to fix the lighting on the base too. Kinder and Snake Dance. Bit of a cheat having both of these. Oh, I like a cheat, Constable Hansy. But you can't have one without the other. The scenes in Tegan's mind could be rendered super freaky, albeit retaining the simplicity of the originals. And of course the snake could be looked at yet again. Plus the Diva Loca jungle and the Menusa settlement could be turned into something jaw-dropping. Inferno. Let's sort the Primords out. I would make them more like the interim stage Primords we see up on the cooling tower. Those are the stuff of nightmares. Then the actual base, lights flickering on and off the more advanced the drilling process gets, the earth groaning and shaking. This is already an epic, but it wouldn't take much to push it into legendary status. Just a bit of tweaking here and there. And the Keys of Marinus make all the different locations shine. Morphatron could be turned into an absolutely horrific place with mind tricks, moody lighting, and jazzed up brain creatures. The jungle episode and the snow episode could easily be made epic, and Millennius could be turned into a bustling metropolis, maybe a bit like Coruscant. And the Conscience Machine could look less like a Kerplunk game and more like some incredible piece of alien tech. And finally, any historical. Marco Polo would indeed be epic, but any of the others could look amazing with some extra dollars or pounds thrown at them.
Thank you, Constable. Look, there's a really good list, and the Keys of Marinus is a favourite story of mine, and yes, I agree with all of that.
Mm-hmm.
Finally, from Howermouse via YouTube, great choices. 2 that spring to mind are Wheel in Space and Caves of Androzani, just for the opportunity to expand the environments of these stories in the immersive model of Alien, 2001: A Space Odyssey, or Gravity. Although Cave stands up well, there's more that could be done with the androids and the disastrous magma creature. It would be great with Wheel to see a Troughton base under siege on an epic scale. Graham Harper could direct both.
Yeah, Wheel in Space would be bloody great.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's our listener feedback, or a best of the past month. Dave, we'll move into what have we been watching. I've watched a few things this past month. I watched Squid Game 3, which I think really redeemed the franchise after a slightly ropey second season. The only disappointing aspect is they clearly seem to want to make an American version and then tie the 2 series together. So there's sort of a coda at the end where I was like, oh Christ, I'm really not sure about this, but what can you do? My DS9 watch continues. The wife and I are now starting season 3. And I would say that there were many more good stories in the second season than the first. I still think there were some comedically ropey ones, and that hard cutoff at 45 minutes, I think, really cruels some episodes, like they're moving along nicely, and then it's like, oh, we've got to wrap up in 30 seconds, and so the episode just wraps up. I've noticed that with a few of them. They're not quite paced properly. And I've finally got back to the new series of All Creatures Great and Small, which I really like, and I think, this might be heresy to some, I think it's as good as the original. By which I'll say it's not an apples and apples comparison. I get that, but as TV productions of their time, for the audiences of their time, I think both are just fantastic for what they were delivering to their audiences.
No, that's fair. I'm glad you're enjoying Deep Space Nine even more. And I did say to you that there's a run of episodes towards the end of Season 2, starting with Blood Oath, which I think are really, really strong. I know you didn't enjoy the Marquee quite as much as I did, but I actually think the Marquee episode is a great summary of the philosophy of Deep Space Nine, that it's easy to be a saint in paradise, but Deep Space Nine, they have to deal with the values of Trek in a much more difficult environment, and I really like that. But you've now reached the Jem'Hadar.
Well, yeah, the Dominion. Then they're not too happy, and I think they're going to come through the wormhole and rip stuff up. Yeah, that's my impression.
No, fair enough. I'll be interested to see how this continues. I did go and watch a whole bunch of Deep Space Nine episodes, starting with Blood Oath and just sort of watching through because I enjoy it. But I wanted to mention just a few films I've seen recently. I did go to the Scandinavian Film Festival and saw a few Norwegian movies. Number 24, Quisling the Final Days, and then I streamed The King's Choice. All three of them are about the experience of Norway in World War II and the resistance and fighting the Nazis, which was a little bit of World War II history I wasn't as familiar with, and that was really, really interesting. And the Quisling movie was sort of a Norwegian version of Downfall. It was really, really good. But I did go and see the new Superman movie, Rob. I enjoyed it. It's the first Superman movie I've seen that I've actually really quite enjoyed. I'm not a particularly big fan of Superman. I don't think the character really works that well on the cinema, but this was a really fun version. I enjoyed the cast, but I did sort of reflect as I waded into some of the debates and some of the reviews, particularly on fandom type sites about, is this the right Superman? Is this valid Superman? And I thought to myself, all this time in the movie, I was nodding going, yeah, they finally got Superman right. I really like this version of Superman. And I realised I have not read a single page of a Superman comic. So who am I to have that opinion? But there's just something about what I understand Superman to be, they got right, and this is what I think Superman is. But I thought, well, here's me as someone who's never read a page of the comic, and I've got, this is what Superman should be, and the other movies are wrong. What chance have other fans got?
Well, like big superheroes, I mean, think of 1960s Batman versus Robert Pattinson Batman versus Christian Bale Batman versus Michael Keaton Batman, and Superman's exactly the same. And there are people who are going to watch each Superman film over the years, and there'll be people nodding and each one saying, this is my Superman. Whether it's the Zack Snyder darker take, whether it's this more fun take, whether it's the Christopher Reeves classic take, whatever. That's the beauty of the characters, but I think there'll always be dissent and fighting because no one can agree on which is the definitive take.
No, I think that's right. So that was fun.
Excellent stuff, Dave. Moving on to next time. Next time, Dave, we're going to do something we've hinted at in the past.
Yes, we've been moving to get to this for some time. Rob, we are going to do something unique. We're going to do both a series deep dive and a story deep dive.
Yes, and that can only mean we're doing The Trial of a Time Lord, which means when you put it up with our Season 22 review that we did some time back, you'll have a complete overview of the Colin Baker era, which is something we've been keen to do for a long time. So The Trial of a Time Lord next month.
Yep, I'll be watching that over the next few weeks, ready to have a chat, but there'll be other things coming from the Doctor Who show, hopefully in August, if not soon after. We expect to record our Gin and TARDIS on the Mark of the Rani. We will certainly have our list makers on Top 5 Master Stories coming out, and if we can watch and record an Alternate Galaxies on Star Trek 2, that may come in August. Just see how our lives go, listeners.
Absolutely. We'll see how we go.
But it's all coming at some point.
It is. It is indeed. But until then, I've been Rob.
And I've been Dave.
We'll see you next time on The Doctor Who Show.
Goodbye.
You've been listening to
The Doctor Who Show with Rob and Dave.
Find us online by searching for
The Doctor Who Show.
We also love it when you write in. Drop us a line anytime at hello@thedwshow.net.